Hello, this is StreamCap, and welcome to another DCS video. The A-18C Hornet has been out for a bit over 7 months at this point, and with it we got the CVN-74 John C Stennis aircraft carrier for naval air operations. A lot of the systems aboard the aircraft carrier are implemented to a reasonable degree, but there still seems to be a certain amount of confusion regarding how to actually set up a carrier force. In this video, I will describe how to configure the John C. Stennis Carrier for Hornet operations. I will also delve into the creation of a carrier strike group, including the addition of a Tachyon-class amphibious assault ship. So first things first, let's place a carrier out on the high seas. And we'll give this group the name carrier group. And we'll set the type to be the John C. Stennis. And I'm also going to give this a unit name. You'll see why in a few minutes. I'm going to give the Stennis an additional speed, let's see, 25 knots, and a heading. And that'll make it easier to operate from it. You can also use the weather to give the carrier a headwind, and this will give the extra lift needed to get fully laden Hornets off the catapult safely. Any conditions resulting in an extra 20 knots of airspeed for the Hornet at the outset is going to be very appreciated by the pilots. The next thing to do is to set up the NAVAIDs, Tachyon, and ICLS. Now if we go to the first waypoint, we see that we don't have any Tachyon set up. Most of the time you actually get a Tachyon here, specifically if you choose the Stennis type before you set it out on the map. Now I chose it afterwards. But we can just simply add it. So activate Tachyon under Perform Command under Advanced Waypoint Actions. And here we have a bunch of different options for the Tachyon station on the Stennis. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to uncheck the bearing checkbox. If you have this checked, the station will only provide bearing information, so it will only tell the aircraft at in what direction it's located, but it won't give the range. This is typical of smaller Tachyon stations, such as if you have a small tanker or something up in the air, you can use that. But for a full-size aircraft carrier, it will easily be able to house a full transmit-receive Tachyon unit. We also want to change the channel. I normally set mine to 74 X-ray. You can set it to anything that's not going to interfere with another Tachyon station on the map. There are lists that define which Tachyon stations are taken on the various maps. I'm not going to go into that. But I go with 74 because the CVN-74, it makes it easy for the pilots to remember. Also, I'm going to set the call sign to STN. And I'm going to set the unit to be the Stennis. And I'll get back to why this is important. With the Tachyon set up, we also want to set up the ICLS for the Hornet pilots. This is to aid landing pilots in case the mission drags on into the night, or if you set difficult weather conditions, they'll still be able to find their way down onto the deck. And that is done the same way. So we'll add another waypoint action, and under Perform Command we'll find Activate ICLS. The important settings here are channel, which can be anything between 1 and 20. I normally set it to 14, just to both numbers end in 4, so both the Tachyon and the ICLS will end in 4. Again, making it easier. There is no other ICLS channel on any of the maps currently, because this is only used by the carriers. It's not used by any land-based air bases. And we're also going to set the unit to the Stennis. And that's really all that is necessary to set up an aircraft carrier for Hornet operations. I want to point out one thing though, and that's that there seems to be an intermittent bug in the waypoint action system, where if the mission drags on for several hours, sometimes these Tachyon and ICLS settings fall off for whatever reason. I haven't had it happen to me more than maybe once or twice, but it's still a possibility. If you find that you have that problem, what you can do is you can place an additional waypoint somewhere in the middle of the path and just reset these same settings on that waypoint. So, just a carrier by its lonesome is not going to be that interesting, and we want to set something else up. So what kind of supporting ships can we get for our carrier? As we see here on the US Navy website, there is actually no fixed structure to a carrier strike group, what was earlier known also as a carrier battle group. But there are some typical ships, and we can add those. So obviously one carrier, and one Ticonderoga class cruiser, 2 Arleigh Burke class missile destroyers, 1 Los Angeles class attack submarine, and 1 supply ship. It turns out, unfortunately, that not all of these classes are available in DCS at this time, so I'll give you my idea of reasonably suitable replacements. For our cruiser, we actually have a Ticonderoga class, and that is the CG-60 Normandy. We do not have any Arleigh Burke class destroyers, or any modern US destroyers for that matter. The Arleigh Burke class is being worked on by ED at this time, as they specified in their latest newsletter. But in the meantime, while we wait for those, I elect to go with the Oliver Hazard Perry class frigates. They are not the same, they don't have the same multi-mission capability. They are not missile destroyers, but for our purposes, they are sufficient. The primary mission for these ships will be air defense anyhow. And that is a role that the Oliver Hazard Perry can fulfill, no problem. So we'll add 2 of those. Now, as for the submarine, we don't have any US submarines in DCS, and honestly, using a Kilo class for this would look odd, to say the least. What I normally do is I omit this one. I go basically on the rationale that it's likely out somewhere submerged doing underwater survey or scouting or something else. I also normally omit the supply ship. Again, since there is no suitable class in the DCS World base. If you are able, you could use one of the old models in the World War II asset pack to sort of play that role. But be aware that this will make your mission unavailable for anyone who doesn't own the asset pack. Also, you could use one of the civilian cargo ship models, but honestly, they do look kind of malplaced, and more importantly, since they are not in the US list of vessels, they would have to be in a different country and in a different group of ships. So you have to handle both these groups of ships simultaneously, and that is going to be very complex to have the formation moving in a good way over longer periods of time, like several hours. You'll likely have to use some scripting to get it perfectly right. Finally, I'm going to add my own addition to this little formation, and that's going to be the Tarawa class assault ship. And I'm going to give that the name Tarawa. And since the Tarawa is used by Harriers and helicopters and such, they also need a Tachyon. They don't need an ICLS because the Harrier doesn't have an ICLS system, but the Tachyon is needed in order to lead any approaching aircraft to the correct actual vessel, to the correct ship. So we'll add another waypoint action here to activate a Tachyon on the Tarawa. So perform command, activate Tachyon, shut off bearing mode. I'm gonna leave the channel to 1 because LHA 1, again, make it easy for the pilots. TWA, and the unit I'm gonna set to Tarawa this time. And the idea with setting the unit here is that this means that this Tachyon signal will emanate from the actual Tarawa model and the Tarawa unit. Otherwise, if you set it to nothing, the Tarawa and the Stennis Tachyons would perhaps be in the middle of the formation, or they would be in some the first vehicle or the last one. Or the point is that it's undefined at this point exactly where it does lead those aircraft, and that means that it's much better to do it this way, because this will actually give the pilots correct guidance to their correct ship. And that pretty much concludes the unit composition for our carrier group. All that remains is to place these in a good pattern so that they look awesome and cool. So let's zoom in on our little battle group here. As you can see, I have the show models option going here, so I can see the individual models of the ships. That makes it a lot easier to place them so that you get a good feel for how they're going to look. The two carriers I'm going to place side by side like this. Naturally, we can account for air traffic. We don't want a bunch of radar dishes and antennas and stuff scraping the bellies of the Hornets and the Harriers as they come into land. So make sure that the appropriate areas, the wakes and also the bows of both ships, are free of any support ships. And usually I place the cruiser over on this side, and I'll place the destroyers sort of like this, and that'll give the two carriers a good air defense umbrella to operate under. And also, it's going to look pretty cool for any Hornet or Harrier or helicopter pilot that spawns into their aircraft on board one of our carriers. Now, if you want a cool feature, you can also add a helicopter to the formation. However, this does involve a bit of tinkering in order to make it match speeds with the ships. So you can have it like going here in between, ostensibly filling the CSAR mission. Uh, there is no real script that I've seen that actually makes it sort of perform CSAR. And also, if you add one of those helicopters, you have to account for the fact that it's gonna run out of fuel like any other aircraft. So you'll likely have to use some kind of respawn script in order to handle the fact that all of a sudden that helicopter is gonna come off station and set down on one of the carriers. And that's pretty much it for our carrier strike group. So all that remains is to verify the Tachyon and ICLS signals, and the easiest way is to simply add a flight of Hornets like so. We'll give him a wingman too. And then just hop into the aircraft and tune the Tachyon and ICLS to the stations in question and just verify that you actually get a signal. So let's do that in conclusion. So here we are in the Hornet. So first we're going to test the Tachyon. So we'll turn the Tachyon on, and it's going to be on station 1. And if we put the Tachyon system up, we see that we have the turbo signal 8.5 right off our nose. And if I set the channel to 7.4, which we set for the Stennis, we'll see that I have that about the same distance as TN, and it's just a bit to the right. ICLS, same thing, channel 14 and on, and we'll take a dive and get within the ICLS cone, and we should get
altitude.
There we go, the ICLS crosshairs that will guide us all the way in to an actual landing on the Stennis deck. So that concludes my little tutorial on setting up the Stennis aircraft carrier. I hope you find this useful, and I hope to see you soon in the air. Until then, take care and have a good day, night, or whatever.